Governor Phil Bryant. Photo, Rogelio V. Solis, AP, Gov. Phil Bryant gave his eighth and final State of the State address to joint session of lawmakers Tuesday night. Much of the term-limited Republican speech focused on Mississippi's economy and educational system. Bryant reflected on positive changes during his 8 years in office, including an unemployment rate that's fallen by half and a high school graduation rate that's climbed from 75% to 83%. Bryant also called for a teacher pay raise, a school safety bill and more criminal justice reform. More, bold text, Gov. Phil Bryant's final State of the State address, the former auditor and lieutenant governor, spoke for about half an hour, describing his time as governor as an amazing journey. "We are truly becoming the great state of Mississippi," Bryant said. Education. Bryant, who once came under fire for calling the state's public education system an abysmal failure, offered an optimistic outlook of the state's academic future during Tuesday's address, praising the state's teachers as critical guardians of Mississippi's future, and calling for lawmakers to pass a teacher pay raise. With all the educational reforms proposed by politicians and all the public posturing by those wanting to be the education champion, none has done more than the teachers, Bryant said. Bryant framed his support for a suite of education laws passed in 2013 as a driving influence for the state's improved national assessment of education progress scores. That year, Bryant signed legislation to ban social promotion for third-grade students unable to pass the lowest performance level of the state's literacy test. "I believe that time and results will record your passage of this act as the single most successful reform to public education in Mississippi history," he said. Bryant incorrectly noted, however, that 93% of the state's third-graders were proficient at reading in 2018. Figures from the State Department of Education show the percentage of third-graders reading at or above grade level last year was just shy of 45%. State Superintendent of Education Carrie Wright has repeatedly said the state's third-grade GATE test does not require students read proficiently to pass, but only that they score above the state's lowest performance level to advance to fourth grade. During the address, Bryant also pushed lawmakers to pass the Mississippi Safe School Act in response to a spate of mass school shootings, saying, "Our schools, which once were a haven of security, have become a place of potential violence." A task force worked the last year to come up with the recommendations, but its report hasn't been released. Senate Education Chairman Gray Tollison said he has drafted a bill for the governor that includes better communication between state and local law enforcement and emergency agencies and schools. He said it does not include the controversial provision of arming teachers, over which state lawmakers have argued in the past. Bryant closely aligned himself with the school choice movement that critics feared as a pivot toward privatization and supporters embraced as an opportunity to disparities in the state's public schools forged by race, geography and income. When Bryant entered office, Mississippi was the only southern state without a state-funded pre-K program. In 2013, Bryant signed legislation funding partnerships between local school districts, child care providers and Head Start to provide early education. In spring 2018, tests administered by the state showed more than 70% of the children served by this model were prepared for kindergarten. Bryant also touted the state's community colleges for providing professional development for child care centers with the goal of improving early childhood learning. Bryant, who shifted his focus to overhauling the state's school funding formula during his penultimate year in office, did not mention his resistance to a failed constitutional amendment envisioned by supporters as a vehicle to force to fully fund public schools. "I told the governor, after his speech, that he has a legacy of education reform that is making a real difference in achievement for our students," said Tollison. More pass rate percentage increases on third-grade reading gate economy. Bryant pointed to a dwindling unemployment rate coupled with more demand for workers as proof that the Magnolia state is on the right track. Legislators and dignitaries applauded when Bryant said the state's unemployment rate had fallen from 9.4% to 4.7% during his tenure. While almost every state in the country has a lower unemployment rate than Mississippi, Mississippi's unemployment rate has dropped to the lowest levels in state history. Bryant said young workers in Mississippi have more opportunity than ever before, saying there are more than 44,000 job opportunities just waiting to be filled. The employment numbers under Bryant have been unequivocally good, said Rep. Trey Lamar, our Senatobia, the staunchest Democrat, can't argue with those things, he said. Lamar also pointed to state revenue, which has grown several $100 million during Bryant's tenure. We cut taxes and we got more money to spend, Lamar said. To me that's a winning combination. However, Bryant has had to make budget cuts multiple times in past years, sometimes dipping into the state's rainy day fund for tens of millions of dollars. More, Governor Bryant recommends teacher pay raise, more money for mental health, no cuts, more, Gov. Bryant forced to cut current year budget again. Leadership. Lamar said some of Bryant's greatest accomplishments have not been legislative wins or new policies, but appointments. Bryant has made smart choices when filling seats on the state's Supreme Court, Court of Appeals, trial benches around the state, educational boards and more, he said. Lamar specifically mentioned the appointment of Drew Snyder to be director of Mississippi's Division of Medicaid. House Minority Leader David Beria, D-Bay St. Louis, also praised Snyder's appointment. The governor has done a fairly good job on the appointments, Beria said. That's where the real power is, in our governor's office, Rep. Steve Holland, D. Tupelo, said Bryant has been a successful governor. Bryant delivered on what he promised, Holland said, meaning cutting taxes and passing conservative social policies, largely without stirring controversy. It's been a pretty solid front on social justice and equality, said Holland, who's served more than decades in the legislature. I don't think he's been terribly offensive as governor. Some governors are offensive. He's been fairly vanilla. Robert Johnson, D. Natchez, said he wished Bryant would have supported efforts to change Mississippi's state flag, which is the only state containing the Confederate Army's battle flag. That would have shown the world, Johnson said. Quote, He could have helped us put on a better face not just to the country, but the rest of the world. However, Johnson did praise Bryant for supporting criminal justice reform in Mississippi. Criminal justice reform. Near the end of Bryant's speech, he called for more criminal justice reform in Mississippi, saying the state has to reduce the recidivism rate of inmates. If President Donald J. Trump can pass nationwide criminal justice reform through a gridlocked and hyper-partisan Congress, surely we can do so right here in Mississippi, Bryant said. Rep. Kathy Sykes D. Jackson, said she has been pleasantly surprised by Bryant's embrace of issues like criminal justice reform. Criminal justice reform is one of the policies that cross party lines, Sykes said, noting that she and the governor see eye to eye on the importance of job training for felons and alternatives to prison for nonviolent offenders. It's blowing my mind, she said. He's probably gonna fall out of the chair when he reads this. It seems like he's had an epiphany of sorts. It's not just criminal justice reform, Sykes said. She said she agreed with Bryant on the new state lottery and the commission formed to help Jackson public schools without necessitating a state takeover. Gov. Bryant is actually ending his tenure on a high note, Sykes said. Healthcare. Bryant stressed the importance of having physicians in rural communities and of growing the overall number of doctors in Mississippi. He did not touch on Medicaid expansion, even as some Mississippi Republicans appear to embrace some form of expansion. Lamar, the Republican representative from Senatobia, said Bryant's appointment of Snyder in 2017 to be director of Mississippi's Division of Medicaid is making a big impact on the state. We don't seem to have the runaway Medicaid budget that we've had in the past since Drew's been over there, Lamar said. That ties directly back into the governor. Johnson, the Democratic representative from Natchez, said he's disappointed Bryant never pushed for Medicaid expansion under the Affordable Care Act. Simmons, the Democratic minority leader in the Senate, had tougher words. The governor really dropped the ball on expanding Medicaid to 300,000 Mississippians who are working Mississippians who needed access to health care, Simmons said, noting it would have created thousands of jobs in medical field. Infrastructure. Bryant called a 2018 special session to address infrastructure funding, the most successful in modern history. This legislature has given them what they need to replace and repair bridges today and has established a funding mechanism to do so into tomorrow, Bryant said. Rep. Jeff Smith, our Columbus, said Bryant's biggest accomplishment as governor was convening a successful special session, which is expected to put hundreds of millions of dollars toward infrastructure projects. A lot of that was his ideas, Smith said. While Smith praised the additional funding, Simmons said it came up hundreds of millions of dollars short considering what Mississippi needs. They have failed to meet the needs of our cities and our counties regarding our crumbling roads and bridges, Simmons said of the state's Republican leadership. He called the legislation passed during Bryant's 2017 special session, putting a band-aid on a problem that required surgery. Read or share this story, https://www.clarendledger.com/story/news/politics/elections/2019/01/15/gov-final-state-state-address-teacher-raise-education/25355578002/